Welcome in. I'm going to be continuing on our journey together in Panem. Um, yeah, and I've already expressed my thoughts on a lot. I don't know how long I'm going to read today. I'm a little tired, but I'm excited to continue and see what happens. So we last left off with Tigress telling Cornelius that they received the first tax billing on their apartment, and Cornelius grabbed Suzanne out of the arena. And what else has happened? I don't remember. Oh, what's his name? The other tribute from District 12 besides Lucy Gray. He just died of rabies. I forget his name, but yeah, that's where we're starting, or where we're ending for now. So, chapter 18. Coriolanus had been in a state of denial about the taxes, but now the reality of his family's displacement hit him like a truck. How could he say goodbye to the only home he'd ever known? To his mother, to his childhood, to those sweet memories of his life before the war. Not gonna yawn. These four walls not only kept his family safe from the world, they protected the legend of the Snow's wealth. He could be losing his residence, his history, and his identity in one fell swoop. They had 6 weeks to come up with the money, to scrape together the equivalent of Tigress's income for the whole year. The cousins tried to assess what they might still have to sell. But even if they sold every stick of furniture and every keepsake, it would only cover a few months at most, and the tax bills would keep showing up every month like clockwork. They would need the proceeds from selling their possessions, however paltry, to rent a new place. Eviction due to tax troubles had to be avoided at all cost. The public shame would be too great, too lasting. So move they must. What are we going to do? Coriolanus asked. Nothing until the Hunger Games are finished. You have to focus on them so you can get that plinth prize, or at least another one. I'll handle this end, she said firmly. She made him a cup of hot milk, laced with corn syrup, and stroked his throbbing head until he fell asleep. He dreamed violent, unsettling things, replaying the events of the arena, and awoke to the usual. Gem of Panem, mighty city, through the ages you shine anew. Would the grandmam still be singing it in their rental in a month or two? Or would she be too humiliated to raise her voice again? For all his derision of the morning recital, the thought saddened him. As he dressed, the stitches on his arm pulled, and he remembered he was supposed to drop by the citadel to get them checked. Dark red scabs had settled on his scraped face, but the swelling had abated. Something's happening. He dabbed some of his mother's powder on, and while it didn't really cover the scabs, the scent soothed him a bit. Their hopeless financial situation... Wow, that's passing right by me. Anyways. Carlova City. Their hopeless financial situation made him accept the tokens Tigress offered him without hesitation. Why bother pinching pennies when the dollars had fled long ago? On the trolley, he choked down his nut butter on soda crackers and tried not to compare it with Miss Ma Plinth's breakfast rolls. Ma Plinth's breakfast rolls. It crossed his mind that, given his rescue of Sejanus, the Plinths might provide a loan. Yeah, I predicted that. Might provide a loan, or even a payout for his silence. Also predicted that. But the grandmam would never allow that. Oh, and the idea of a Snow groveling before a plinth was unthinkable. The plinth prize, though, was fair game, and Tigress was right. These next few days would determine his future. At the academy, the 10 mentors drank their tea and readied themselves for the cameras. Every day brought them more scrutiny. The game makers had sent over a makeup person who managed to tone down Coriolanus' scabs and give his eyebrow a little shape while she was at it. No one seemed in the mood to talk about the games directly, except Hilarious Heavensby, who could talk of nothing else. It's different for me, said Hilarious. I checked my list last night. Every single one of them tributes has had food, or at least water, since they've been in the arena, except old no-show Wovie. Where is she, anyway? I mean, how would I know if she just curled up and died somewhere in those tunnels? Maybe she's already dead, and I'm just sitting here like a jackass playing with my communicuff. Coriolanus wanted to tell him to shut up because other people had real problems, but instead he maneuvered himself into a seat on the end next to Festus, who was deep in conversation with Persephone. Lucky Flickerman opened by recapping the remaining tributes and inviting Lepidus to take comments from the mentor pool. Coriolanus was called upon first thing to respond to the Jessup scare. He made a point of contemplating Lysistrata's brilliant handling of the rabies situation and thanking her for her generosity in the last minutes of Jessup's life. He turned to the section where the fallen mentors sat, asked her to stand, and invited the audience to give her a round of applause. Not only did they oblige, but at least half stood up, and while Lysistrata looked embarrassed, he thought she didn't really mind. Sorry, my nose is a little stuffy. Then he added that he hoped to properly thank her by fulfilling her prediction that the mentor would be a tribute from District 12, namely Lucy Gray. The audience could see for themselves how clever his tribute had been, and they shouldn't forget how she stood up by Jessup until the bitter end. Again, that was behavior you might expect of a capital girl, but of one from the districts? It was something to think about, how much they rewarded character in the Hunger Games victor, how much she reflected their values. Excuse me. I kind of just ate, so I think I'm still digesting stuff, but something must have hit home with the audience, because at least a dozen pings sounded from his communicuff right off. He held up the cuff for the camera and thanked the generous sponsors. As if unable to stand that much attention being showered on Coriolanus, Pup sat forward. I need to stop making noise when I yawn. It's actually so much play. Pup sat forward and loudly announced that he'd better get Lamina her breakfast and ordered up a storm of food and drink. No one else could compete. She was the only tribute to be seen in the arena, so it was just one way in which Pup was annoying. It gratified Coriolanus that no new pinging came from his rival's cuff. Knowing he wouldn't be called upon again until the others had been interviewed, Coriolanus adopted an interested demeanor, but barely listened to their pitches. The idea of approaching old Strabo Plinth for money, not blackmailing him, of course, but giving him the opportunity to make a financial gift of thanks, kept nagging at him. What if Coriolanus dropped by the Plinths to check on Sejanus's health? That had been a bad cut on his leg. Yes, what if he just dropped by and then saw what happened? Lucky interrupted Eo's thoughts on what Cirque might do with the drone. Well, if the light-emitting diodes on the drone aren't broken, he might be able to fashion a flashlight of some sort, which could give him a great advantage at night, to direct the audience's attention to Reaper's emergence from the barricade. Lamina, who had been collecting water, bread, and cheese from a half-dozen drones, neatly lined up her provisions along the beam. She barely acknowledged Reaper's presence, but he walked over to her with purpose. He pointed up to the sun and then to her face. Okay. He pointed up at the sun and then to her face. For the first time, Coriolanus noticed the toll the long days outdoors were taking on Lamina's skin. She'd been badly sunburned, and her nose was peeling in response. On close inspection, the tops of her bare feet were red as well. Reaper indicated her food. Lamina rubbed her foot and seemed to consider whatever his offer might be. They went back and forth for a bit. Then both nodded in agreement. Reaper jogged across the arena and climbed up the flag of Panem. He pulled out his long knife and stabbed through the heavy fabric. Loud objections came from the audience in the hall. The disregard for the sanctity of the national flag shook them. As Reaper began to saw his way through the flag, cutting off a piece the size of a small blanket, the unease grew. Surely this should not go unchecked. Surely he should be punished in some way. But given that being in the Hunger Games was the ultimate punishment, no one knew what form it should take. Lepidus hurried over to Comentia to ask what she made of her tribute's behavior. Well, it's a stupid move, isn't it? Who's going to sponsor him now? Not that it matters, since you never fed him, Pup commented. I'll feed him when he does something that merits feeding, said Clementia. Anyway, I think you've got that covered today. Pup frowned. I do? Clementia nodded to the screen as Reaper jogged back to the beam. Further negotiation occurred between him and Lamina. Then, on what appeared to be the count of 3, Reaper tossed up the wadded piece of flag as Lamina dropped down a piece of bread. The flag didn't quite make it high enough for her to catch hold of. More negotiation ensued. When Reaper finally delivered it, after several attempts, she rewarded him with a chunk of cheese. It was an official alliance, but the exchange seemed to bond the two a bit. While Lamina shook out the flag and draped it over her head, Reaper sat behind one of the posts and ate his bread and cheese. They didn't speak to each other again, but a relative calm came over them, and when the pack appeared at the far end of the arena, Lamina pointed them out. Reaper gave her a nod of thanks before withdrawing behind the barricade. Coral, Mizzen, and Tanner sat in the stands and made eating motions. Festus, Persephone, and Demetia all obliged them, and the three tributes shared the bread, cheese, and apples dropped by the drones. Back in the studio, Lucky had brought his pet parrot, Jubilee, to the seat, and he spent several minutes trying to coax it to say, "Hi, handsome," to Dean Highbottom. The bird, a depressed creature in the midst of battling mange, perched wordlessly on Lucky's shoulder as the dean folded his hands and waited. "Oh, say it, come on. Hi, handsome. Hi, handsome." I don't think... sorry, I forgot Dean Highbottom's voice. I don't think he wants to. Hold on. I gotta lock in for this. Hold on. Don't mind me. Yeah. Do you want the house tour? I can take you to the first... Oof. I could take you to the first, second, third floor. Anyway. I don't think he wants to, Lucky, said Dean Highbottom finally. Perhaps it doesn't find me handsome at all. What? No. He's just shy in front of strangers. He held out the bird. Would you like to hold him? The dean leaned back. No. Lucky pulled Jubilee back to his chest and stroked his feathers with a fingertip. So, Dean Highbottom, what do you make of it all? All what? Dean Highbottom asked. All this stuff. All this different stuff happening in the Hunger Games. Lucky waved his hand in the air. All of it. Well, what I'm noticing is the new interactivity of the games, said Dean Highbottom. Lucky nodded. Interactivity? Go on. Right from the beginning, even before, actually, when the bombing occurred in the arena, it not only took out participants, it changed the landscape. The dean continued. Change the landscape, Lucky repeated. Yes, now we have the barricade, the beam, access to the tunnels. It's a brand new arena, and it's made the tributes behave in a brand new way. The dean explained. And we have drones, said Lucky. Exactly right. Now the audience is an active player in the games. Dean Highbottom inclined his head toward Lucky. And you know what that means. What? Said Lucky. The dean spoke the next word slowly, as if to a small child. It means we're all in the arena together, Lucky. Lucky furrowed his brow. Huh, I don't quite get that. Dean Highbottom tapped his his temple with his forefinger. Think it over. Hi, handsome, squawked Jubilee despondently. Oh, there we go. I told you, didn't I? Crowed Lucky. You did, admitted the dean, and yet it was still unexpected. Nothing much else happened before lunch. Lucky did the weather report district by district, with the added fillip of Jubilee's company, but the bird refused to talk again, so Lucky began speaking for it in a high-pitched voice. How's the weather look in District 12, Jubilee? They've got snow, Lucky. Snow in July, Jubilee? Coriolanus snow. Coriolanus gave the camera a thumbs up when they cut for his reaction. He could not believe this was his life. Whatever, bro. So lame. Coriolanus is so lame. Oh my gosh, this guy. Lunch disappointed, as the menu consisted of nut butter sandwiches, and he'd had nut butter for breakfast. Okay, well, at least you're fucking eating. Oh my gosh. He ate it, because he ate anything free, and it was important to keep his strength up. A ripple went through the hall, indicating something was happening on the screen, and he hurried to resume his seat. Maybe Lucy Gray had surfaced. She had not, but the pack's morning laziness had given way to direction. The three strode across the arena until they were directly under Lamina's beam. She took no notice at first, but Tanner smacking a sword blade against one of the poles brought her to attention. Lamina sat up and surveyed the pack. She must have sensed a change in the air, because she pulled out her axe and her knife and polished them on the flag. After a brief huddle, in which the District 4 tributes relinquished their tridents of Tanner, the pack split up. Coral and Mizzen each went to one of the metal posts that supported the beam, and Tanner stood directly under Lamina, holding the pair of tridents. Knives in teeth, Coral and Mizzen gave each other a nod. They began to climb their respective posts. Festus shifted in his seat. Here we go. They'll never make it, said Pup in agitation. They've trained to work on ships. They're trained to work on ships. They climb ropes as part of it, Persephone pointed out. Rigging, said Festus. Yes, I get it. My father's a commander, after all, said Pip. Rope climbing is different. The posts are more like trees. But Pip had been getting on everyone's nerves, and even the mentors without a tribute in the confrontation seemed eager to comment. What about masts? Asked Vipsania. Or flagpoles, Urban chimed in. They won't make it, said Pup. While the District 4 pair lacked Lamina's smooth style, they were indeed making it, slowly pulling their way higher and higher. Tanner directed them, calling on Coral to wait a moment when Mizzen fell behind. Look, they're trimming it so they can reach the top together. Oh my gosh, I can't fucking read. Look, they're timing it so they can reach the top together, said Io. They're making her choose who to fight. Then the other one will reach the beam. So she'll kill one of them and climb down, said Pup. So she'll kill one of them and climb down, said Pup. Sorry, I'm doing that annoying noise. Where Tanner will be waiting, Coriolanus reminded him. Well, I know that, said Pup. What do you expect me to do? It's not like they have rabies and there's a simple fix like sending in water. Never would have crossed your mind, said Festus. Of course it would have, snapped Pup. Shut up, all of you! A silence fell, but largely because Coral and Mizzen were nearing the top. Lamina's head went back and forth as she decided who to confront. Then she headed for Coral. No, not the girl, the boy, exclaimed Pup, jumping to his feet. Now she'll have to fight the boy on the beam. I do the same thing. I wouldn't want to fight a girl up there, said Demisha. The murmurs of agreement came from a few of the mentors. No? Pup reconsidered. Maybe you're right. Lamina reached the end of the beam and swung the axe down at Coral without hesitation, just missing her scalp, but shaving off a tuft of hair. Coral retreated, lowering herself about a yard, but Lamina struck at her a few more times, as if to drive the point home. As expected, this gave Mizzen time to mount the beam, but when Tanner threw the trident up to him, it peaked about 2/3 of the way up and fell back to the ground. Lamina took one last swipe at Coral, then moved swiftly for Mizzen. He was no match for her sure-footedness on the beam, and only managed a few hesitant steps as she bore down on him. Tanner did better with his second throw, but the trident bounced off from the underside of the beam and landed in the dirt. Occupied by crouching to try and catch it, Mizzen straightened up just as Lamina came in, bringing the flat side of the axe against the outer part of his knee. The force of the blow threw them both off balance, but while she recovered by straddling the beam, Mizzen fell, losing his knife and just barely catching himself with one arm. Even the sound system in the arena picked up Coral's war cry as she gained the top. Tanner ran down to her end and managed to hurl the trident within range. The easy way Coral snatched the weapon from the air drew few exclamations of admiration from the captive audience. Lamina gave Mizzen a gaze, but his helpless condition posed no immediate threat, so she turned and braced herself for Coral's attack. Lamina had better balance, but Coral's weapon had more range. After Lamina managed to block the first few jabs with her axe, Coral wove the trident in a twisting move that distracted the eye before it plunged into her opponent's abdomen. Coral released the weapon and stepped back, using her knife as a backup, but none was needed. Lamina fell off the beam and died on impact. No! Cried Pup, and the words echoed around Heavensby Hall. He stood stock still for a long moment, then picked up his seat and left the mentor section, ignoring Lepidus's outstretched mic. He slammed the chair down next to Livia's and strode out of the hall. Coriolanus thought he was trying not to cry. Oh my gosh, somebody just died and you're... I literally can't. So insensitive. Coral crossed to Mizzen and stood over him for a disconcerting beat, in which Coriolanus wondered if she was planning to kick his arm free and send him after Lamina. Instead, she sat down on the beam, locking her legs for support, and helped him to safety. The axe had damaged his knee, although it was difficult to gauge to what extent. He half slid, half lowered himself down the pole, closely followed by Coral, who picked up the unused trident from the ground where Tanner had abandoned it. Mizzen leaned back against the pole, testing his knee. After performing some kind of dance over Lamina's body, Tanner bounded over to them. Mizzen grinned and raised his hands for a victory slap. Tanner had just made contact when Coral drove the second trident into his back. He fell forward into Mizzen, who braced the pole, shoved him away. Tanner turned in a circle, one hand swatting uselessly behind him as if to dislodge the trident. But the barbed tins were buried deep. He fell to his knees, his expression more wounded than shocked, and collapsed face down in the dirt. Mizzen finished him with a knife to the neck. He then went back and sat against his pole, and Coral took a strip of fabric from Lamina's flag cloth and began to bind his knee. At the studio, Lucky's face stretched into a comedic mask of shock. "Did you just see what I saw?" Demisha had quietly gathered her things, her lips pressed together in disappointment. But when Lepidus pushed the mic at her, she spoke in a calm, detached voice. "It's a surprise. I thought Tanner might win this thing, and he probably would have if his allies hadn't betrayed him. I guess that's the takeaway. Be careful who you trust." "In and out of the arena," said Lepidus, nodding sagely. "Everywhere," Demisha agreed. "You know, Tanner was a very good-natured sort of person, and District 4 took advantage of that." She looked sadly at Festus and Persephone, suggesting this reflected badly on them, and Lepidus gave a disapproving click of his tongue. It's one of the many things I've... Wait, who's saying this? Yeah, it's one of the many things I've learned from being a mentor in the games. I'll always cherish my experience here, and I wish all the remaining mentors the best of luck." "Well said, Demisha. I think you've just showed your fellow mentors how to be a good loser," said Lepidus. "Lucky?" The cut revealed Lucky trying to lure Jubilee off the chandelier with a cracker. "What? Are you going to talk to the other one? What's his name? The commander's kid?" "He declined to comment," said Lepidus. "Well, let's get back to the show," called Lucky. The show was over for the moment, though. Coral finished bandaging Mizzen's knee and collected their tridents, yanking them from her victims' bodies. Ugh. Mizzen limped as the pair walked unhurriedly across the arena to their preferred tunnel. Satyria came over and had the mentors rearrange their chairs into 2 neat rows of 4. Io, Urban, Clementia, and Vipsania in the front. Coriolanus, Festus, Persephone, and Hilarious in the back. The musical chairs continued. Musical. Like Lucy Gray. Anyway. Perhaps the indignities of being Lucky's dummy had become too great, because Jubilee refused to come down from the chandelier. Lucky leaned heavily on the stringers in Heavensby Hall, and in front of the arena, where the crowd had set up cheering sections for the various tributes. Team Lucy Gray was well represented by young and old, male and female, and even a handful of Avoxes. But they didn't really count, having been brought along to hold signs. Coriolanus wished Lucy Gray could see how many people loved her. He wished she knew how he advocated for her. He'd become more active, pulling Lepidus over during quiet stretches and praising Lucy Gray to the skies. As a result, her sponsored gifts had reached an all-time high, and he felt confident he could feed her for a week. There was nothing really left to do but watch and wait. Treach came out long enough to snag Lamina's axe and for Vipsania to feed him. Tesley retrieved another fallen drone and collected some food from Urban. Little else occurred until late afternoon, when Reaper wandered out of the barricade, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He seemed... Another one. Okay. He seemed unable to make sense of the scene before him. The stabbed bodies of Tanner, and particularly Lamina. After walking around for a time, he lifted Lamina up, carried her over to where Bobbin and Marcus lay, and arranged the 3 in a row on the ground. For a while, he paced around the beam, then dragged Tanner over beside Lamina. Over the next hour, he collected first Dill, and then Soul, adding them to his makeshift morgue. Jessup remains the only one left out. Reaper was probably afraid of contracting rabies. Yeah, that's fair. Once he neatly lined up the others, he swatted at the flies that had gathered. After pausing a moment in thought, he went back and cut off a second piece of the flag, draping it over their bodies and causing another wave of outrage in the hall. Reaper shook out Lamina's flag remnant and tied it like a cape around his shoulders. The cape seemed to inspire him, and he began to spin slowly, looking back over his shoulder to watch it fly out behind him. He ran then, spreading his arms out as the flag streamed in the sunlight. Exhausted by the day's activities, he finally climbed into the stands and waited. "Oh, for heaven's sakes, feed him, Clemmy," said Festus. "Mind your business," said Clementia. "You're heartless," Festus told her. "I'm a good manager. It could be a long Hunger Games." She gave Coriolanus an unpleasant smile. "And it's not like I've abandoned him." Coriolanus thought about inviting her to the Citadel for his follow-up appointment. He could use some company, and she could visit her snakes. 5 o'clock rolled around with the dismissal of the student body, and the 8 remaining mentors gathered for beef stew and cake. He couldn't say he missed Amisha, and certainly not Pup, but he missed the buffer they had provided between him and the likes of Clementia, Vipsania, and Urban. Even Hilarious, with his woeful tales of being a heavens bee, had become a strain. When Vipsania released them at around 8 o'clock, he headed straight for the door, hoping it wasn't too late to have his arm checked. Excuse me. The Citadel guards recognized him, and after they searched his book bag, he was allowed to keep it and go down to the lab unescorted. He wandered a bit before finding his destination, then sat in the clinic for half an hour before a doctor appeared. She checked his vitals, examined the stitches, which were doing their job, and told him to wait. An unusual energy filled the lab. Quick footsteps, raised voices, impatient commands. Coriolanus listened hard, but he couldn't make out the cause of the activity. He did hear the words arena and games more than once, and wondered about the connection. When Dr. Gall finally appeared, she made only a cursory check of his stitches. "Another few days," she confirmed. "Tell me, Mr. Snow, did you know Gaius Breen?" "Did I?" asked Coriolanus, picking up on the past tense immediately. "I do. I mean, we're classmates. I know he lost his legs in the arena. Is he... He's dead. Oh, wait. What? Oh. Sorry. Trying to switch between voices and shocking plot, but... He's dead. Complications from the bombing," said Dr. Gull. "Oh, no." Coriolanus couldn't process it. Gaius dead? Gaius Breen? He remembered a joke Gaius had told him about how many rebels it took to tie a shoe. He never even visited him in the hospital. When is the funeral? "That's being worked out. You must keep it to yourself until we make an official announcement," she warned him. "I'm only telling you now so that at least one of you will have some... I'm only telling you now so that at least one of you will have something intelligent to say to Lepidus. I trust you can manage that." "Yes, of course. That will be strange, announcing it during the games. Like a victory for the rebels," said Coriolanus. "Exactly. But rest assured there will be repercussions. In fact, it was your girl who gave me the idea. If she wins, we should compare notes. And I haven't forgotten you owe me a paper." She left, pulling the curtains close behind him. Free to go, Coriolanus buttoned his shirt up and collected his book bag. He was supposed to write what was he supposed to write about again? Something about chaos, control, contract. He felt fairly sure it began. Oh, it's been a minute. He felt fairly sure it began with a C. When he approached the elevator, he found a pair of lab assistants ahead of him, trying to maneuver a cart into the car. On the seat sat a large tank filled with the snakes that had attacked Clementia. Did she say to bring the cooler?" asked one of the assistants. "Not that I remember," said the other. "I thought they'd been fed. We better check. If we're wrong, she'll go ballistic." She noticed Coriolanus. "Sorry, need to back out." "No problem," he said, and stepped aside so they could wheel the tank out. The elevator doors closed, and could hear the whir of it ascending, and he could hear the whir of it ascending. "Oh, sorry. It will be back in a minute," the second assistant said. "No problem," Coriolanus repeated, but he was beginning to suspect a very great problem. He thought of the activity in the lab and the games being mentioned, and Dr. Gall promising repercussions. "Where are you taking the snakes?" he asked as innocently as possible. "Oh, just to another lab," said one. The assistants exchanged a look. "Come on, the cooler takes two." The pair receded into the lab, leaving him alone with the tank. "In fact, it was your girl who gave me the idea." His girl, Lucy Gray, who'd made an entrance into the Hunger Games by dropping a snake down the mayor's daughter's back. "If she wins, we should compare notes." "Notes about what? How to use snakes as weapons?" He stared into the undulating reptiles, imagining them being loose in the arena. What would they do? Hide? Hunt? Attack? Even if he knew how snakes behaved, which he didn't, he doubted these would conform to any norms, as they were genetically designed by Dr. Gall. With a sharp pang, Coriolanus had a vision of Lucy Gray in their final meeting, clutching his hand as he promised her they could win. But there was no way he could protect her from the creatures in this tank, any more than he could protect her from tridents and swords. At least she could hide from those. He didn't know for sure, but he was guessing snakes would head straight for the tunnels. The dark would not impair their sense of smell. They would not recognize Lucy Gray's scent, just the way they had not recognized Clementia's. Lucy Gray would scream and fall to the ground, her lips turning purple then bloodless, while bright pink and blue and yellow pus oozed onto her ruffled dress. That was it. The thing the snakes had reminded him of the first time he'd seen them. They matched her dress, as if they had always been her destiny. Without knowing quite how, Coriolanus found the handkerchief in his hand, neatly balled up like a prop in one of Lucky's magic tricks. He moved to the snake tank, his back to the security camera, and leaned over, resting his hands on the cover as if fascinated by the snakes. From that vantage point, he watched the handkerchief fall through the trapdoor and disappear beneath the rainbow bodies. Okay, I was actually thinking something like this would happen. So, I was thinking the snakes were going to be in the arena because we knew that, like, I had talked about them being mentioned. But I remembered how they talked about the scent. I was thinking that the rose powder thing of Coriolanus's that he gave to Lucy Gray was going to be enough for them to recognize Coriolanus's scent on Lucy Gray and not attack her. But this is really interesting. The fact that he has the handkerchief that she held and he's feeding it to them now. Like, this is smart. This is real smart. I didn't think it would happen this way, but I did think something like this would happen, where somehow the snakes would recognize the scent of Lucy Gray or something of Coriolanus is on Lucy Gray. So, anyways, we continue into chapter 19. What had he done? What on earth had he done? His heart raced as he blindly turned down one street and then another, trying to make sense of his actions. He couldn't think clearly, but had the dreadful feeling that he'd crossed some line that could not be uncrossed. The avenue felt full of eyes. There were few pedestrians or drivers out, but even their notice felt glaring. Coriolanus ducked into a park and hid in the shadows, on a bench surrounded by bushes. Excuse me. He forced himself to control his breathing, counting 4 in and 4 out until his blood stopped pounding in his ears. Then he tried to think rationally. All right, so he dropped the handkerchief with Lucy Gray's scent, the one from the outside pocket of his book bag, into the snake tank. He'd done it so they wouldn't bite her as they had Clementia, so they would not kill her, because he cared about her. Because he cared about her? Or because he wanted her to win the Hunger Games so that he could secure the plinth prize? If it was the latter, he had cheated to win, and that was that. Hold on. You don't know if those snakes were going to the arena, he thought. The assistants had, in fact, told him otherwise. There was no history of such a thing ever occurring. Perhaps it had just been a temporary flight of madness, and even if the snakes did end up in the arena, Lucy Gray might never encounter them. It was a huge place, and he didn't think snakes just went around attacking people left and right. You had to step on them or something, and even if she did run into a snake and it didn't bite her, how would anyone trace that back to him? It required too much high-security knowledge and access that no one could presume he had, and a handkerchief with her scent. And why would he have that? It was okay. He was going to be okay. Except that line. Whether anyone pieced together his actions or not, he knew he had crossed it. In fact, he knew he'd been dancing on top of it for some time, like when he'd taken Sejanus's food from the dining hall to feed Lucy Gray. It had been a small infraction, motivated by his desire to keep her alive and his anger at the game maker's negligence. An argument could be made for basic decency there, but it was not a lone incident. He could see it now, the slippery slope of the last few weeks that had started with Sejanus's leftovers and ended with him here, shivering in the dark on a deserted park bench. What awaited him farther down that slope if he was unable to stop his descent? What else might he be capable of? Well, that was it. It stopped now. If he didn't have honor, he had nothing. No more deception. No more shady strategies. No more rationalization. From now on, he'd live honestly. This is the Coriolanus Snow we're talking about. Yeah, no. That's not happening. No more shady strategies. No more rationalization. He'd live honestly. And if he ended up as a beggar, at least he would be a decent one. His feet had carried him far from home, but he realized the plinth apartment was just a few minutes away. Why not pop in? An Avox in a maid outfit opened the door and gestured to ask if she could take his book bag. He declined and inquired if Sejanus was free. She led him to a drawing room and indicated that he should sit. While he waited, he took in the furnishings with a knowing eye. Fine furniture, thick carpets. Okay. Embroidered tapestries, a bronze bust of someone. a bronze bust of someone, while the exterior of the apartment had not impressed. No expense had been spared on the interior. All the Plinth needed was an address on the Corso to solidify their status. Mrs. Plinth bustled in, full of apologies and flour. Sir Janice, it seems, had gone to bed early, and he'd caught her in the kitchen. Would he come downstairs for a moment and have a cup of tea, or perhaps she should serve tea in here, like the Snows had? No, he assured her. The kitchen would be fine, as if anyone served a guest in the kitchen but a Plinth. But he had not come to pass judgment. He had come to be thanked, and if that involved baked goods, all the better. Would you like a pie? I've got blackberry, or peach if you can wait for it. She nodded to a pair of newly assembled pies on the counter awaiting the oven. Or maybe cake? I made custards this afternoon. The Avoxes like those best, because, they're easy to swallow. Coffee or tea or milk? The lines between Ma's eyebrows deepened in anxiety, as if nothing she could offer would be enough. Although he'd eaten dinner, the events of the Citadel and the walk had left him drained. Oh, milk, please. And the blackberry pie would be a real treat. No one can compete with your cooking. Ma filled a large glass to the brim. She carved out a full quarter of a pie and plunked it onto a plate. Do you like ice cream? She asked. Several scoops of vanilla followed. She pulled a chair up to a surprisingly simple wooden table. It sat under a framed needlepoint of a mountain scene, overlaid with a single word, home. My sister sent me that. She's the only one I really stay in touch with now, or who stays in touch with me, I guess. Doesn't really fit with the rest of the house, but I have my corner down here. Please, sit, eat. Her corner boasted the table with 3 mismatched chairs, the needlepoint, and a shelf filled with little oddities. A pair of rooster salt and pepper shakers, a marble egg, and a soft doll with patched clothing. The sum total of the possessions, Coriolanus suspected, that she'd brought from home, her shrine to District 2. It was pitiful, the way she clung to that backward mountain region. Oh my gosh, that's brutal. Okay, there's a lot of popo out tonight, y'all. Anyway, hold on. Everyone go drink some water. Hydrate or dehydrate, as I say. Anyway, it was pitiful the way she clung to that backward mountain region. Yikes. Poor little displaced person without a hope of ever fitting in, spending her days making custards for Avoxes who would never taste them, and pining for the past. Oh, I didn't even think about that. You can't taste without a tongue. He watched her slide the pies into the oven and took a bite of his slice. His taste buds tingled in pleasure. How is it? She asked anxiously. Superb, he said. Like everything you cook, Mrs. Plinth. It wasn't an exaggeration. Ma might be pathetic. Damn, that's brutal. Excuse me. Ma might be pathetic, but she was something of an artist in the kitchen. She allowed herself a small smile and joined him at the table. Well, if you ever want seconds, our door's always open. I don't even know how to begin to thank you, Coriolanus, for what you've done for us. So Janus is my life. I'm sorry he can't visit with you. He's taken a lot of that sedative. Can't seem to sleep otherwise. So angry, so lost. Well, I don't have to tell you how unhappy he is. The capital isn't really the best fit for him, said Coriolanus. For any of us Plinths, really. Strabo says that while it's hard for us now, it will be better for Sejanus and his children. But I don't know. She glanced up at her shelf. Your family and friends, that's your real life, Coriolanus, and we left ours back in 2. But you know that already. I can see it. I'm glad you've got your grandma and that sweet cousin. Coriolanus found himself trying to cheer her up, saying that things would be better once Sejanus graduated from the academy. The university had more kinds of people from all over the capital, and he was sure to make new friends. Mrs. Plinth nodded, but didn't seem convinced. The Avox maid caught her attention and communicated in a kind of sign language. All right, he'll come up after he finishes his pie, Mrs. Plinth told her. My husband would like to see you, if you don't mind. I think he wants to thank you. When Coriolanus swallowed his last bite of pie, he bid Ma good night and followed the maid up the stairs to the main floor. The thick carpeting silenced their footsteps, so they arrived at the open library door without warning, and he was able to get a look at Strabo Plinth with his guard down. The man stood at a fancy stone fireplace. Ooh, that was good. Stone fireplace, his tall frame propped up by an elbow on the mantel. staring down into where the flame would be in another season. Now the hearth was cold and empty, and Coriolanus had to wonder what he saw there that would provoke the profoundly sad expression on his face. One hand gripped the velvet lapel of his expensive smoking jacket, which seemed all wrong, like Mrs. Plinth's designer dress or Sir Janice's suit. The Plinth's wardrobe always suggested that they were trying too hard to be capital. The unquestionable quality of their clothes clashed with their district persona instead of disguising them, just as the grandmam in a flour sack dress would still scream Corso. Mrs. Plinth... Okay, loud engine. Mrs. Plinth... Oh, sorry, Mr. Plinth met his gaze, and Coriolanus felt the sensation he remembered from encounters with his own father, a mix of anxiety and awkwardness, as if, at that moment, he'd been caught doing something foolish. This man, however, was a Plinth, not a Snow. Coriolanus produced his best society smile. "Good evening, Mr. Plinth. I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all. Come in. Sit." Mr. Plinth gestured to the leather chairs before the fireplace, rather than the ones before his imposing oak desk. This was to be personal, then, not business. "You've eaten? Of course, you couldn't get out of the kitchen without my wife stuffing you like a turkey. Do you want a drink? A whiskey, maybe?" Adults had never offered him a beverage stronger than Posca, which went quickly enough to his head. He couldn't risk that for this exchange. "I don't know where I'd put it," he said with a laugh, patting his stomach as he settled himself into a chair. "But please, you go ahead." "Oh, I don't drink." Mr. Plinth folded himself into the facing chair, and looked Coriolanus over. "You look like your father." "I hear that a lot," said Coriolanus. "Did you know him?" "Our business overlapped at times." He drummed his long fingers on the arm of the chair. "It's striking, the resemblance. But you're nothing like him, really." "No," Coriolanus thought. "I'm poor and powerless." Although maybe the perceived difference was good for tonight's purposes. His district-hating father would have loathed seeing Strabo Plinth admitted to the capital and becoming a titan of the munitions industry. That was not why he'd given his life in the war. Nothing at all. Or you'd never have gone into that arena after my son," continued Mr. Plinth. "Impossible to imagine Crassius Snow risking his life for me. I kept asking myself why you did it." "Not much of a choice, really," thought Coriolanus. "He's my friend," he said. "No matter how many times I hear that, it's difficult to believe. But even from the beginning, Suzanne singled you out. Maybe you take after your mother, huh? She was always gracious to me when I came here on business from before the war, despite my background. The very definition of a lady. Never forget it." He gave Coriolanus a hard stare. "Are you like your mother?" The conversation wasn't going the way Coriolanus had imagined. Where was the talk of rewarded money? Oh my gosh, dude. Just have a conversation. He couldn't be persuaded to take it if it was never offered. "I'd like to think I am, in some respects." "In what respects?" asked Mr. Plinth. The line of questioning felt weird. In what way was he anything like that loving, adoring creature who'd sung him to sleep each night? "Well, we shared a fondness for music." "Did they?" "She liked music, and he didn't hate it," he guessed. "Music, huh?" said Mr. Plinth, as if Coriolanus had said something as frivolous as puffy clouds. "And I do believe we both believed that good fortune was something to be repaid on a daily basis, not taken for granted." Oh, wait. This is Coriolanus. It's hard to tell who's reading what. "And I do believe we both believe that good fortune was something to be repaid on a daily basis, not taken for granted," he added. He had no idea what that meant, but it seemed to register with Mr. Plinth. He thought it over. "I'd agree with that." "Oh, good. Yes, well, Sejanus," Coriolanus reminded him. Mr. Plinth's face grew weary. "Sejanus. Thank you, by the way, for saving his life." "No thanks necessary. As I said, he's my friend. Now is the time for the money, the refusal, the persuasion, the acceptance." "Good. Well, I guess you should get home. Your tribute's still in the games, right?" asked Mr. Plinth. Thrown by the dismissal, Coriolanus rose from his chair. "Oh, yes, you're right. Just wanted to check on Sejanus. Will he be back to school soon?" "No telling," said Mr. Plinth. "But thanks for stopping by." "Of course. Tell him he's missed," said Coriolanus. "Good night." "Night." Mr. Plinth gave him a nod. No money. Not even a handshake. Coriolanus left off balance and disappointed. The heavy bag of food and the chauffeur assigned to drive him home made a decent consolation prize, but in the end his visit had been a waste of time, especially when Dr. Gall's paper still awaited him. The nice addition to your prize application. Why did everything have to be an uphill battle for him? Dude, you live in the capital. Like, I know reputation means a lot. It means a lot for anyone. And to some level, I don't think we should invalidate anyone's struggles. But at some point, you have to realize that it's not actually that uphill. And it's okay to fall down the hill, you know? As long as you get back up. Like, maybe if you're climbing uphill, it's not the hill you're supposed to be climbing up, you know? And if you fall back down and end up in a valley, start up a different hill, you know? And maybe that's how it's supposed to happen. But Coriolanus is too prideful to fall down that hill. And that's a really big vice that he needs to reconcile with himself, but I don't think he will, because psychologically, he would never even think of himself being prideful. He's obsessed with his image, he's obsessed with his reputation. And to some level, I think everyone is. But it's just interesting seeing how Coriolanus specifically is interacting with everyone in a way that's, like, manipulative. It's so manipulative to the point where he'd do anything just for himself. Like, it's so Machiavellian. It's everything he does has a secret benefit to himself and himself only. And the fact that nobody realizes that because they see him as doing, like, outward things towards other people it's just insane. It's very manipulative. But anyways, Coriolanus told Tigris he checked on Sejanus. She didn't press him for further explanation of his lateness. She made him a cup of the special jasmine tea, an indulgence like splurging on the tokens, but who cared now? He settled down to work, writing the 3 C's. Oh, I see you. Reading the 3 C words on a scrap of paper. Chaos, control. And what was the third? Oh yes, contract. What happened if no one was in control of humanity? That was the topic he was supposed to address. And he had said there was chaos. And Dr. Gall had said to start there. Chaos. Extreme disorder and confusion. Like being in the arena, Dr. Gall had said. That wonderful opportunity, she had called it. Transformative. Coriolanus thought about what it had felt like to be in that arena, where there were no rules, no laws, no consequence to one's actions. The needle of his moral compass had swung madly without direction. Fueled by the terror of being prey, how quickly he himself had become a predator, with no reservations about smashing Bobbin to death. He transformed, all right, but not in anything he was proud of, into anything he was proud of. And being a Snow, he had more self-control than most. He tried to imagine what it would be like if the whole world played by those same rules. No consequences. People taking what they wanted, when they wanted, and killing for it if it came to that. Survival driving everything. There had been days during the war when they'd all been too scared to leave the apartment. Days when the lawlessness had made even the capital an arena. Yes, the lack of law, that was at the heart of it. So people needed to agree on laws to follow. Was that what Dr. Gall had meant by social contract? The agreement not to rob, abuse, or kill one another? It had to be, and the law required enforcement, and that was where control came in. Without the control to enforce the contract, chaos reigned. The power that controlled needed to be greater than the people, otherwise they would challenge it. The only entity capable of this was the capital. It took him until about 2 a.m. to sort that out, and then it barely filled a page. Dr. Gall would want more, but that was all he could manage tonight. He crawled into bed, where he dreamed of Lucy Gray being hunted by the rainbow snakes. He woke with a start, trembling to the strains of the anthem. "You've got to hold yourself together," he said. "The games can't last much longer." The breakfast delights provided by Mrs. Plinth gave him a boost into day 4 of the Hunger Games. On the trolley, he gorged himself on a slice of blueberry pie, sausage roll, and a cheese tart. But between the games and the Plinths, his wristband had become snug. He would make an effort to walk home. The games and the Plinths, his wristband had become snug. Oh, like he's gaining weight. Huh. He would make an effort to walk home. Velvet ropes cordoned off the section of the dais with the 8 remaining mentors, and now a sign with the occupant's name hung on the back of each chair. Assigned seating, that was new, but probably an attempt to mitigate some of the snarkiness that had sprung up in the last few days. Coriolanus remained in the back row between Io and Urban. Poor Festus was sandwiched between Vipsania and Clementia. Lucky welcomed the audience with a long-suffering Jubilee, who had been confined in a cage more suitable to a rabbit than a bird. Nothing stirred in the arena, and the tribute seemed to be sleeping in. The only new development was that someone, likely Reaper, had dragged Jessup's body to the line of the dead near the barricade. Coriolanus nervously awaited the announcement of Gaius Breen's death, but no word was forthcoming. The game makers spent time with the crowd in front of the arena, which continued to expand. The different fan clubs now sported shirts with tribute and mentor faces, and Coriolanus felt both pleased and embarrassed to see his image staring back at him from the giant screen. Not until mid-morning did the first tribute make an appearance, and it took the audience a moment to place her. "It's Wofi!" Hilarious shouted in relief. "She's alive!" Coriolanus remembered the child as scrawny, but now she looked skeletal. Her arms and legs like sticks, her cheeks sunken. She crouched at the mouth of the tunnel in her filthy striped dress, squinting into the sunlight and clutching an empty water bottle. "Hold on, Wovi, food's on the way," said Hilarious, hammering away at his cuff. She couldn't have much in the way of sponsors, but there was always someone willing to place a bet on a long shot. Lepidus swooped in, and Hilarious spoke at length about Wovi's merits. He presented her absence as stealth, claiming it had been their strategy all along for her to hide and let the field clear. And look at her! Here she is in the final 8! As a half-dozen drones sped across the arena towards her, Hilarious became even more excited. "There's her food and water now! All she has to do is grab it and get back in hiding." As the supplies showered her, Wovi lifted her hands but seemed in a daze. She pawed at the ground, located a bottle of water, and struggled to unscrew the cap. After a few gulps, she sank back against the wall and gave a small belch. A thin stream of silver liquid trickled out the side of her mouth, and then she went still. The rat poison. The audience watched uncomprehendingly for a minute. "She's dead," announced Urban. No, she's not dead. She's just resting," said Hilarious. But the longer Wovi stared unblinkingly into the bright sunlight, the harder that was to believe. Coriolanus examined her spittle. Not clear, not bloody, but slightly off. Wondered if Lucy Gray had managed to put the rat poison to use. It would have been easy to poison the last swallow of water in a bottle and discard it in one of the tunnels. Desperate, Wovi would not have thought twice about downing it, but no one else, not even Hilarious, seemed to find anything amiss. "I don't know," said Lepidus to Hilarious. "I think your friend might be right." They waited another 10 long minutes without a flicker of life from Wovi before Hilarious gave in and lifted his chair. Lepidus heaped on the praise, and Hilarious, while disappointed, reckoned things could have gone a lot worse. "She managed to hang in there a long time, given her condition. I wish she'd come out sooner so I could have fed her, but I feel like I can hold my head up. Final 8 is nothing to sneeze at." Coriolanus mentally checked his list. Both tributes from 3, both from 4, and Treach and Reaper. That was all that stood between Lucy Gray and victory. 6 tributes and a fair amount of luck. Wovi's death went unnoticed for a while in the arena. It was almost lunchtime when Reaper came out from the barricade, still wearing his flag cape. He approached Wovi warily, but she had posed no threat alive, and she certainly didn't dead. Reaper crouched beside her and picked up an apple, then frowned as he examined her face more closely. He knows, thought Coriolanus. He at least suspected that it wasn't a natural death. Reaper dropped the apple, lifted Wovi into his arms, and headed to the dead tributes, abandoning the food and water on the ground. "You see?" Clementia asked no one in particular. "You see what I'm dealing with? My tribute's mentally unbalanced." "I guess you're right," said Festus. "Sorry about earlier." And that was it. Wovi's death caused no suspicion outside the arena, and inside it only Reaper questioned the cause. Lucy Gray was not prone to carelessness. Perhaps she had chosen frail Wovey as a target because the child's already grave condition would mask the poisoning. He felt frustrated by his inability to communicate with her and update their strategy together. With so few left, was hiding still the best approach, or would it be better for her to act more aggressively? Of course, he didn't know. She could be planting poisoned food and water at this very moment, in which case she'd need more, which she couldn't provide if she didn't make an appearance. Although he didn't believe in it, he tried to channel her telepathically. Let me help Lucy Gray. That's crazy. Channeling your telepath. Let me help Lucy Gray, or at least let me see that you're all right, he thought. Then added, I miss you. That's like kind of cute. Reaper had returned to the tunnels by the time District 4 scavenged Wolvie's food. Their absolute lack of concern with its origin reassured Coriolanus that the possibility of poisoning had flown under the radar. They sat right down where Wovey died and gobbled up every bite. Then they strolled back to their tunnel. Mizzen walked with a limp, and he would still outmatch most of the remaining tributes if it came to a fight. Coriolanus wondered if, in the end, it would all come down to Coral and Mizzen deciding which District 4 tribute took home the crown. In all his years, Coriolanus had never left a school lunch unfinished, but the cardboard bowls of lima beans on noodles turned his stomach. Still full from the plinth breakfast, he just couldn't bring himself to swallow even a spoonful. It required a quick exchange of his untouched bowl with Festus's empty one to avoid a reprimand. Here, lima beans still taste like war to me. That's me and oatmeal. One waif and I want to hide in a bunker, said Festus, who made quick work of the stuff. Thanks. I overslept and missed breakfast. Coriolanus hoped the lima beans hadn't been a bad omen. Then he admonished himself. This was no time to start embracing superstitions. He needed to keep his wits sharp, stay personable for the cameras, and get through the day. Lucy Gray must be getting hungry by now. He planned his next food delivery while he sipped his water. With Hilarious gone, the 3 remaining mentor chairs in the back row had been centered, and Coriolanus resumed his seat in the middle. It was, as Dementia had called it, like a game of musical chairs, and these were the very people he played with during childhood. If he had ever had children, and he planned to one day, would they still be among the elite Capital Social Club, or would they be relegated to lesser circles? It would help if they had a wider family network to draw on, but he and Tigress were the only Snows in their generation. Wait, Tigress is a Snow too? Look, I know they're cousins, but I don't know how they're related. I thought she was like a sister, like a sister's child or something, so she had a different name, but I guess not. Without her, he'd be headed into the future alone. Little occurred in the arena that afternoon. Coriolanus watched for Lucy Gray, hoping for a chance to feed her, but she remained elusive. The audience outside the arena provided most of the excitement, and Coral fans mixed it up with Treach fans over who was worthiest to be crowned victor. Few punches were thrown before the peacekeeper separated the 2 groups, sending them to opposite sides of the crowd. Coriolanus felt glad his own fans had a little more class. In the late afternoon, people. I think there's something happening outside. Sorry, I paused for a really long time. But it sounds like there's somebody talking on a megaphone. I know, there's a political event happening at my school tonight, and I literally can't. Oh my gosh. Anyways. Where was I? Oh yeah, the 2 felt glad his own fans had a little more class. In the late afternoon, when Lucky resumed his coverage, Dr. Gall sat across from him, holding Jubilee in his cage. The bird rocked back and forth like a small child trying to comfort itself. Lucky eyed his pet with worry, perhaps anticipating its loss to the labs. We have a special guest with us today, head game maker Dr. Gall, who's been making friends with Jubilee. I hear you have some sad news for us, Dr. Gall. Dr. Gall moved Jubilee's cage to the table. Yes, due to injuries sustained in the rebel bombing in the arena, another one of our academy students, Gaius Breen, has died. Dr. Gall... Oh, wait. As his classmates cried out, Coriolanus tried to center himself. Any minute he might be called upon to respond to Gaius's death. But that wasn't the source of his anxiety. Gaius would be easy enough to eulogize. He hadn't an enemy in the world. I think I speak for everyone when I say we extend our sympathies to the family, said Lucky. Dr. Gall's face hardened. We do, but actions speak louder than words, and our rebel enemies seem somewhat hard to hearing. In response, we've planned something special for their children in the arena. Shall we tune in? Said Lucky. In the center of the arena, Tesley and Cirque squatted over a pile of rubble, poking around for who knew what. Apparently, they had no interest for Reaper, who sat high in the stands, his back to the arena wall, wrapped in his cape. Suddenly, Treach burst out of a tunnel and bore down on the District 3 tributes, who fled for the barricade. Murmurs of confusion came from the audience. Where was the something special promised by Dr. Gall? They were answered by the sight of an oversized drone flying into the arena, transporting the Rainbow Snake tank. Coriolanus had all but convinced himself that the snake attack had been a product of an overheated imagination, but the entry of the tank ended that. His brain had assembled the puzzle pieces in exactly the right order. What he didn't know was how the snakes would respond to being unleashed, but he'd been in the lab. Dr. Gall did not breed lapdogs. She designed weapons. The unusual package caught Treach's attention. Perhaps he thought some extra special gift had been earmarked for him, because he halted as the drone reached the middle of the arena. Tesley and Cirque paused as well, and even Reaper rose to observe the delivery. The drone released the uncovered tank about 10 yards above the ground. Rather than shattering, the container bounced on impact. Then, like a flower opening its petals, its walls fell to the ground. Snakes shot out in all directions, creating a multicolored sunburst in the dust. In the front row, Clementia jumped to her feet and let out a blood-curdling scream, almost causing Festus to fall out of his chair. As most people were only just registering the new development on the screen, her reaction seemed extreme. Afraid that Clementia would spill the whole story in her panic. Oh, I forgot. Clementia's not actually a bitch. She just was bit by these snakes. Coriolanus leaped up and wrapped his arms around her from behind. Not sure if the move was meant to be comforting or confining, Clementia went rigid but silent. They're not here. They're in the arena, Coriolanus said in her ear. You're safe. But he continued to hold her as the action unfolded. Maybe Treach's lumber district background had given him some familiarity with snakes. The second they erupted from the tank, he turned on a heel and sprinted for the stands. He bounced up the debris hill like a goat and kept moving, hurtling over seats as he ascended. The few moments of confusion that Tesley and Cirque experienced came at a great cost. Tesley made it to one of the poles and managed to shimmy up a few yards to safety, but Cirque stumbled over a rusty old spear, and the snakes overtook him. A dozen pairs of fangs pierced their body, and then, as if satisfied, the snakes moved on. Pink, yellow, and blue streaks his body as the wounds pumped out bright pods. Smaller than Clementia, with double the venom in their system, Cirque struggled to breathe for about 10 seconds before he died. Ugh. Tesley stared at his fallen body and sobbed in terror as she clung to the pole. Below her, the delicate snakes bunched, rearing up and dancing around the base. Lucky's voice boomed above the scene. What's happening? These are mutations we've developed in our labs in the capital, Dr. Gall informed the audience. They're only snakelets, but full grown, they'll easily outrun a human, and that post will be no problem for them to climb. They're designed to hunt humans and reproduce rapidly, so any casualties can be swiftly replaced. By this time, Treach had climbed out onto the narrow shelf over the scoreboard, and Reaper had found refuge on the roof of the press box. The few snakes that had managed to scale the rubble into the stands gathered below them. The mics picked up the muted sounds of a girl's scream. They got Lucy Gray, Coriolanus thought in despair. The handkerchief didn't work. But just then, Mizzen exploded from the tunnel nearest the barricade, followed by a shrieking coral. A single snake dangled from her arm. She tore it free, but dozens charged for her, and the moment it hit the ground, targeting her lower legs. Mizzen flung away his trident and made a flying leap to gain the pole access from Tesley. Despite his bad knee, he halved his previous time climbing to the top. From there, he witnessed Coral's frantic but blissfully short end. Oh my gosh. With the targets on the ground disposed of, most of the snakes regrouped under Teslie. Her grip on the pole began to fail, and she cried out to Mizzen for help, but he only shook his head, more stunned than malicious. People in the audience began shushing each other, and then, although Coriolanus did not know why, as the hall began shushing each other then, although Coriolanus did not know why. As the hall quieted, he picked up on what sharper ears had detected. Somewhere, ever so faintly, someone was singing in the arena. His girl. Lucy Gray emerged from her tunnel, moving in slow motion, and backward. She lifted each foot with care as she stepped behind herself, swaying gently to the rhythm of her music. La la la, la 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 la. It just says la la la. That was the extent of the lyrics at the moment, but it was compelling nonetheless. Following her, as if mesmerized by the melody, came half a dozen snakes. Coriolanus released Clementia, who had calmed down, giving her a gentle push in Festus's direction. He stepped forward toward the screen, holding his breath as Lucy Gray continued to back in, and then curve around toward where Jessup's body had lain. Her voice became louder as she, knowingly or not, worked her way back to the mic, perhaps for one last song, one last performance. None of the snakes were inclined to attack her, though. In fact, she seemed to be drawing them from around the arena. The bunch under Tesley's pole thinned. A few dropped from the stands, and dozens slithered out the tunnels to join in a general migration to Lucy Gray. They surrounded her, flocking in from all sides, making it impossible for her to continue retreating. The bright bodies undulated under her bare feet, curling around her ankles as she lowered herself gently onto a chunk of marble. With the tips of her fingers, she spread her ruffles out in the dust, as if by way of invitation. As the snakes swarmed her, the faded fabric vanished, leaving her with a brilliant skirt of weaving reptiles. That's crazy. Okay, I have to keep reading for a little bit. For just a little bit. What time is it? Okay, yeah. Okay. I have to keep reading for a little bit. Because this is what I think Lucy Gray is singing right now, which I thought was going to happen. This has to be the end of the games. Coriolanus squeezed his hands into fists, unsure of the viper's intentions. The snakes in the tank, having been exposed to his scent on the proposal, had entirely ignored him. But they seemed magnetically drawn to his tribute. Could it be that the environment made the difference? Violently released from the warm, close quarters of their tank into the vast, unsheltered arena, were they seeking her out as the only familiar scent they could find? Had they gravitated to her to harbor in the safety of her skirt? Lucy Gray knew nothing of this, but that day in the zoo, when he'd meant to tell her about Clementia and the snakes, her circumstance had been so much worse than his own that he'd kept silent on the subject. Even if he had told her, it would be a real leap of faith in his abilities to imagine he'd found a way to tamper with the snakes in the games. What did she think was keeping them in check? It had to be her singing. Had she sung to the snakes at home? That snake was a particular friend of mine. She told the little girl in the zoo. Perhaps she'd befriended several snakes back in District 12. Perhaps she thought if she stopped singing, they would indeed kill her now. Perhaps this was her swan song. She would never want to go out without a finale. She would want to die with her boots on, in the brightest spotlight she could find. When Lucy Gray began the lyrics, her voice was soft but clear as a bell. You're headed for heaven, the sweet old hereafter, and I've got one foot in the door. But before I can fly up, I've got loose ends to tie up, right here, in the old there before. An old song, Coriolanus thought, with talk of the hereafter, which reminded him of Sejanus and his breadcrumbs, but also that funny line about the there before. That must mean the present, here, now, while she was still alive. I'll be along when I finish my song, when I've shut down the band, when I've played out my hand, when I've paid all my debts, when I have no regrets, right here, in the great there, in the old there before, when nothing is left anymore. Excuse me. The game makers cut to a longer shot, which made Coriolanus want to shout an objection until he realized why. Every snake in the arena appeared to have fallen subject to her siren song and flocked to her. Even those in the nest under Teslie, who was ready prey, had abandoned their target and made for Lucy Gray. Oh, that rhymed. Still shuddering from the trauma, Teslie slid shakily to the ground and hobbled over the chain-link fence on one section of the barricade. She climbed her way to a safe height while the song continued. I'll catch you up when I've emptied my cup, when I've worn out my friends, when I've buried at both ends, when I've cried out all my tears, when I've conquered my fears, right here in the old there before, when nothing is left anymore. The camera made its way back to a tight shot of Lucy Gray. Coriolanus had the feeling that she usually catered to an audience well plied with liquor. In the days before her interview, he listened to many a number that conjured up a drunken group waving tin cups of gin from side to side in some dive bar. Although the liquor didn't seem essential, because when he took a quick look over his shoulder, he saw that several people in Heavensby Hall had began to sway to her rhythm. Her voice rose in volume, echoing around the arena. I'll bring the news when I've danced off my shoes, when my body's closed down, when my boat's run aground, when I've tallied the score and I'm flat on the floor, right here in the old there before, when nothing is left anymore. And then, reaching a crescendo, she brought it home. When I'm pure like a dove, when I've learned how to love, right here in the old there before, when nothing is left anymore. The last note hung in the air while the audience held its collective breath. The snakes waited for it to fade, and then, or was it his imagination, began to stir. Lucy Gray responded by softly humming, as if to a restless baby. The viewers quietly relaxed as the snakes relaxed around her. Lucy looked as spellbound as the snakes when the cameras cut back to him. Lucky looked as spellbound as the snakes when the cameras cut back to him, eyes a bit glazed, mouth slackly open. He snapped back when he saw his own image on the feed and turned his attention to his stone-faced Dr. Gall. Well, head game maker, take a bow. Heavensby Hall erupted into a standing ovation, but Coriolanus could not peel his eyes off Dr. Gall. What was going on behind that inscrutable expression? Did she attribute the snake's behavior to Lucy Gray singing, or did she suspect foul play? Even if Dr. Gall knew about the handkerchief, perhaps she would forgive him, as the result had been so dramatic. This is true. Dr. Gall allowed herself a small nod of acknowledgement. Thank you, but the focus today should not be on me, but on Gaius Breen. Perhaps his classmates might share some remembrances with us. Lepidus leaped into action in Heavensby Hall, collecting stories from Gaius's classmates. It was well that Dr. Gall had given him a heads up, because while everybody had a joke or a funny story to share, only Coriolanus managed to tie it in the heroic loss, the snakes, and the retribution they had witnessed in the arena. We could never let the death of such a stellar youth of the capital go without repercussions. When we hit back twice as hard, just as Dr. Gall had mentioned in the past. Lepidus tried to turn the conversation to Lucy Gray's extraordinary performance with the snakes, but Coriolanus only said, She's remarkable, but Dr. Gall is right. This moment belongs to Gaius. Let's save Lucy Gray for tomorrow. After a full half hour of remembrance, Lepidus bid the show's adieux to Festus and Io as Coral and Circe had succumbed to venom. Coriolanus gave Festus a bear hug, surprisingly emotional at seeing his reliable friend leave the dice. He felt the loss of Io as well, since she veered more toward clinical than combative, which was more than he could say for the others remaining, except perhaps Persephone, who he decided to share his supper hour with. Cannibals over cutthroats. That's crazy. He's still profiling her as a cannibal. Ugh. The student body went home, leaving the handful of active mentors to their steak dinners. Coriolanus glanced around at his competitors. Being in the final 5, he should have been flying high, but if one of the others won, Dean Highbottom could still give him a prize that was insufficient to pay for university. Perhaps citing the demerit as his reason. A prize? But if one of the others won, D. Highbottom could still give him a prize that was insufficient to pay for university, perhaps. Only the plinth prize would truly protect him. Okay, yeah. He shifted his focus to the screen, where Lucy Gray continued to hum to her pets. Dusty disappeared behind the barricade, and Mizzen, Treach, and Reaper held their lofty positions. Clouds rolled in, portending a storm and creating a dazzling sunset. The bad weather brought a quick nightfall, and he had not yet finished his pudding when Lucy Gray faded from view, and a deep rumble of thunder shook the arena. He hoped for lightning to provide some illumination, but the heavy downpour that followed made the night impenetrable. Coriolanus decided to sleep in Heavensby Hall, as did the other 4 remaining mentors. No one except Vipsania had thought of bringing bedding, So the rest arranged themselves in the padded chairs, propping up their feet and using book bags as makeshift pillows. As the rainy night cooled the hall, Coriolanus dozed off in his chair, one eye half open for any activity on the screen. The storm obscured all, and eventually he drifted off. Near dawn he woke with a start and looked around. Vipsania, Urban, and Persephone slept soundly. From a few yards away, Clementia's large dark eyes shone in the dim light. He did not want to be her enemy. If the snow fortress was about to fall, he would need friends. Till the snake incident, he counted Clementia among his best. She'd always gotten on well with Tigress, too. But how to make amends? Clementia had one hand tucked inside her shirt, while she fingered the collarbone she presented in the hospital, the one covered in scales. Did they go away? He whispered. Clementia tensed. They're fading, finally. They said it may take as long as a year. Are they painful? It was the first time the idea had occurred to him. Not painful. They pull on my skin. She rubbed the scales. It's hard to explain. Heartened by the confidence, he took the plunge. I'm sorry, Clemmy, really, about all of it. You didn't really know what she had planned, said Clementia. No, I didn't. But after, in the hospital, I should have been there for you. I should have broke down the doors to make sure you were okay, he insisted. Yes, she said emphatically, but she seemed to relent a little. But I know you were hurt, too, in the arena. Oh, don't make excuses for me. He threw up his hands. I'm worthless, and we both know it. A hint of a smile. Almost. I guess I should thank you for keeping me from making a complete fool of myself today. Did I? He squinted as if trying to recall. All I remember is clinging to you, not necessarily hiding behind you, but there was definitely clinging. She laughed a little, but then became serious. I shouldn't have blamed so much on you. I'm sorry, I was terrified. With good reason. I wish you hadn't had to watch that today, he said. Maybe it was cathartic. I feel better somehow, she confessed. Am I terrible? No, he said. The only thing you are is brave. And so, their friendship was shakily renewed. They let the others sleep while they shared the last cheese tart in Coriolanus' stash, talking of this and that, and even rolling around the idea of trying to set up an alliance between Lucy Gray and Reaper in the arena. Since it seemed out of their control, they abandoned it. The two would pair up together, or they would not. At least we're allies again, he said. Well, not enemies, Clementia allowed. But when they went to wash their faces for the camera, she loaned him her soap, so he wouldn't have to use the abrasive liquid goop in the bathrooms. And somehow the small but intimate gesture let him know he was forgiven. No breakfast was provided, but Festus came in early to pass out egg sandwiches and apples in the spirit of camaraderie. Persephone beamed at him over her teacup. Now that Clementia had lightened up, Coriolanus didn't feel as threatened by the mentor pool. They all wanted to win, but that was largely in their tributes' hands. He assessed Lucy Gray's competitors. Tesley, small and brainy. Mizzen, deadly but injured. Treach, athletic but still something of an unknown. Reaper, too strange for words. The last of the clouds rolled out with the sunrise. Dead snakes littered the arena, draped over rubble, floating in puddles, drowned perhaps or unable to survive the cold, wet night. Some genetically engineered creatures didn't do well outside the lab. Lucy Gray and Tesley were nowhere to be seen, but the three boys in soggy clothes hadn't ventured down from the heights. Mizzen was sleeping, his body belted to the beam. As the other students filed into Heavensby Hall, Vipsania and Clementia, who seemed almost normal, sent food to their tributes. When the drones arrived, Treach ate hungrily, but Reaper again brushed off his food, climbing down into the arena to scoop water from a puddle. Indifferent to Treach and Mizzen, who finally awoke, he went about collecting coral and cirque and adding them to his row. The other boys watched him warily, but neither engaged him, put off either by his eccentric behavior or the possibility of stray snakes. They were probably hoping that someone else would finish him off, but his work remained uninterrupted, and he returned to the press box when he tidied his morgue. Treach sat on the edge of the scoreboard, swinging his feet while Mizzen mimed eating. Persephone responded immediately, ordering him a large breakfast. After a minute, Tessie showed up, her face pinched in concentration. She hauled out a drone that, while much like the original delivery craft, appeared slightly altered. She positioned herself directly under Mizzen. Does she think that'll fly? Asked Vipsania dubiously. Even if it does, how could she control it? Irvin, who'd been scowling at the screen, sat forward suddenly in his seat. She wouldn't have to. She wouldn't need to if... But how did she... He trailed off, trying to puzzle something out. Tessie flipped a switch, raised her arms, and launched the drone into the air. It descended, revealing a cable that connected the base of the drone to a loop on her wrist. Thus tethered, the drone began to fly in a circle about halfway between her and Mizzen. He looked down, completely perplexed, but got distracted by the arrival of the first drone from Persephone. It dropped a chunk of bread down to him, and made as if to return home as usual. Then, a few yards out, it swerved and came back to him. Mizzen leaned back, surprised. He reflexively swatted at it, but it only passed over him, opening its claws to deliver a non-existent gift, and came in again. "What's wrong with that drone?" asked Persephone. No one knew, but at the moment, a second drone came in with water, and a third with cheese. They too deposited their packets only to hang around, attempting repeated deliveries. But the drones, which had been timed for a smooth airdrop, began to bump into one another, and sometimes into Mizzen. The tail of one caught him in the eye, and he cried out, lashing at it. "Is there any way for me to contact the game makers? I mean, I sent 3 more," said Persephone. "There's nothing they can do," said Urban in amusement. "She found a way to hack them. She's blocked their homing direction, so space is their only destination." Sure enough, as other 3 drones arrived, one at a time, they malfunctioned in a similar fashion. Mizzen was their sole target, and what had seemed at first funny turned deadly. He got to his feet and attempted to flee down the beam, but they swarmed around him like bees to a honey pot. Having left his trident on the ground, he pulled his knife and attempted to fight them, but the most he received was momentarily knocking them off course. They weren't programmed to make contact with him, but as they ricocheted off one another and his blade, more and more collided into him, until they gave the appearance of an attack. Mizzen began to grope his way to the pole, the very one on which he'd left Tessie to her fate, but his knee wouldn't cooperate. Frantic now, he took a wild swing at the drones, throwing his weight onto his injured leg, which wobbled and then gave way. He lost his balance and plummeted towards the ground, snapping his neck sideways on contact. "Oh, oh!" Persephone exclaimed as he hit the ground. "Oh, she killed him!" Vipsania frowned at the screen. "She's smarter than she looks." Tessie gave a satisfied smile and reeled in her drone, switching it off and giving it a loving hug. "Do not judge a book by its cover," Irvin chuckled as he tapped some gifts into his communicuff, "especially if it belongs to me." His glee was short-lived. While featuring the drone incident, the game makers had neglected to show the wider picture, in which Treach climbed down from the scoreboard and through the stands, dropping into the arena. He seemed to appear out of thin air, make a gigantic leap into frame, and bring his axe down on Tessie in one fell swoop. She had barely taken a step when the blade connected with her skull, splitting it open and killing her instantly. Oh my gosh. Treach leaned his hands on his knees, puffing with exertion, and then sat right on the ground next to her, watching the blood ooze onto the stand. The drones arriving with a shower of food for her set him in motion again. He collected a dozen parcels and withdrew behind the barricade. Urban covered his moment of disbelief with disgust and rose to go on. He could not escape Lepidus's ever-present mic, though, and barely managed not to snarl when he said, "That's it for me. Laugh a minute, wasn't it?" Then he walked off, leaving Persephone to expand on her regrets and her gratitude for the opportunity to be a mentor. "You made it to the top 5, Lepidus beamed to her. "No one can ever take that away from you." "No," she said somewhat dubiously. "No, that's the kind of thing that sticks." Coriolanus looked from Clementia to Vipsania. "Just us, I guess." The 3 arranged their chairs in a row, with Coriolanus in the middle, while others cleared away the seats of the defeated: Lucy Gray, Treach, Reaper. Final 3. Final girl. Final day? Maybe that, too. Lucky made his entrance in a hat, stuck with 5 sparklers. "Hello, Panda M! Had this hat done especially for the final 5, but they've been sending off their own sparks." He pulled 2 sparklers out of the hat and hurled them off his shoulder blindly. "Final 3, anybody?" One of the sparklers fizzled out on the floor, but the second set a curtain to smoking, eliciting a high-pitched yipping sound and panicked footwork from Lucky. The crew member ran on screen with a fire extinguisher to handle the crisis, allowing Lucky to regain his composure. As his 3 remained... Yo, I'm tired. No. As his 3 remaining hat sparklers died, the number of sponsors and gamblers began flashing at the bottom of the screen. Wowee, the betting's getting hot and heavy. Do not miss out on the fun. Coriolanus' communicuff pinged healthily, but so did Vipsania's and Clementia's. A lot of good it will do me, Clementia murmured to Coriolanus. He doesn't trust me enough to eat anything I send. Lucy Gray had to be hungry, but he assumed she was resting in the tunnels. He wanted to send her food and water, both for sustenance and as a conduit for the poison. Since her last 2 opponents could easily overpower her, he had to do something to put the odds in her favor. For now, he could think of nothing but to keep the crowd on her side. When Lepidus approached him for his promised thoughts on Lucy Gray's performance, he laid it on thick. Coriolanus didn't know what it would take to prove to people she was not district if she hadn't convinced them by now. I feel a great injustice may have occurred by her being not just in the reaping, but in District 12 at all. People will need to judge for themselves. If you agree with me, or even suspect I might be right, you know what to do. While the new barrage of donations hitting his communicuff was affirming, he didn't know how it would help. He could probably feed her for weeks on what he already had. But the only tribute moving around the arena was Reaper, who had descended from the press box, cutting off another large swath of flag on his way. Gaunt and unsteady, he teetered over to add mizzen and tessellae to his collection, using the new piece of flag to cover them. With effort, he climbed up to the back row of the arena, where he dozed off in the sunlight, rocking gently back and forth, his cape spread out to dry. Coriolanus wondered if he would soon perish of natural causes, if starving to death was a natural cause. He wasn't entirely sure. Was it natural if hunger had been used as a weapon? To his relief, Lucy Gray materialized just before noon in the shadows of a tunnel. She surveyed the arena and, judging it safe, stepped into the sunlight. The mud on the hem of her ruffled skirt had begun to cake, but the damp dress still clung to her. While Coriolanus ordered her a feast on his communicuff, Lucy Gray crossed to Reaper's puddle and knelt. She scooped up water, slacking her thirst and washing her face. After combing out her hair with her fingers, she twisted it into a loose knot, finishing off just as a dozen drones entered the arena. She appeared not to notice them as she took a bottle from her pocket and dipped the neck into the puddle, collecting an inch or so of water. After swishing it around, Lucy Gray poured the water back into the puddle and was making to refill the bottle when the incoming drones caught her attention. As the food and water began to drop around her, she tossed away the old bottle and gathered her gifts into her skirt. Lucy Gray started for the nearest tunnel, but then glanced up at Reaper lolling in the stands. She changed course, hurried to his morgue, and lifted the flag material. Her lips moved as she counted the fallen. She's trying to figure out who's left in the games, Coriolanus said into the mic that Lepidus had pushed in her face. Maybe we should put it up on the scoreboard, joked Lepidus. I'm sure the tributes would find that helpful, said Coriolanus. Seriously, that's a good idea. Suddenly, Lucy Gray's head shot up, and her provisions in her skirt fell to the dirt as she turned on a heel and ran. She had heard what the audience could not. Treach swung out from behind the barricade, wielding his axe, and caught her wrist as she passed under a beam. Lucy Gray twisted around, dropping to her knees, fighting wildly as he raised the axe. No! Coriolanus jumped to his feet, pushing Lepidus aside. Lucy Gray! Then 2 things happened simultaneously. As the axe began to fall, she flung herself into Treach's arms and clung to him, avoiding the blade. Bizarrely, they seemed to embrace each other for a long moment, until Treach's eyes widened in horror. He shoved her away, dropping the axe, and tore something from the back of his neck. His hand shot into the air, fingers gripped tightly around the bright pink snake. Then he collapsed to his knees and smashed into the ground again and again until he fell dead in the dirt. The lifeless snake still clutched in his fist. His chest rising and falling, Lucy Gray whipped around to locate Reaper, but he was still sat rocking in the stands. No, I like mushrooms. Sorry, that out of context is crazy. My mom just texted me about a mushroom dish. Anyways. Lucy Gray whipped around to locate Reaper, but he was still sat rocking in the stands. Momentarily safe, she pressed one hand against her ear and waved to the audience. Against her heart and waved to the audience. As the crowd in the hall applauded, Coriolanus let his breath out in a huff and turned to acknowledge it. He'd done it. She'd done it. With her pocket full of poison, she made it to the final 2. She must have sheltered the pink snake in her pocket, just as she had the green one at the reaping. Was there more? Or had Treach Or had Treach beaten the final survivor to death? Treach beaten the final survivor to death. No telling, but just the possibility of another reptilian weapon made Lucy Gray seem deadly. When Lepidus ushered off Vipsania, who thanked the game makers through gritted teeth, Coriolanus sank into his chair and watched Lucy Gray reclaim her feast. He leaned over to Clementia and whispered, "I'm glad it's us." She answered with a conspiratorial smile. Wow, that's a weird word. As Lucy Gray flattened the wrappings and spread all her food out in a pleasing fashion, Coriolanus thought of their picnic at the zoo. Was she restaging it now for his benefit? Something tugged at his heart, and the memory of the kiss hit him. Were there more in his future? For a minute, he drifted into a daydream of Lucy Gray winning, leaving the arena and coming to live with him in the Snows penthouse, which was somehow saved from taxes. He'd attend the university on his plinth prize, while she headlined at Pluribus's newly reopened nightclub, because the capital would agree to let her stay. And, well, he hadn't worked out all the details, but the point was, he got to keep her. Oh, that's a little possessive. And he wanted to keep her, safe and close at hand, admired and admiring, devoted, and entirely, unequivocally his. If what she'd said just before she kissed him, "The only boy my heart has a sweet spot for now is you," was true, then wouldn't she want that too? Stop it, he thought. No one has wanted anything yet. She had polished off most of her food, so he ordered another round, a large one that she could squirrel away and live off of for the next few days, in case she just decided to hunker down and wait for Reaper to die. It was a good plan, low risk to her and inevitable if he stayed on his current course of rejecting all sustenance. But what if he didn't? What if he regained his senses and decided to eat the newly unlimited sponsor gifts that Clementia could provide him with? Then it would come down to a physical matchup again, and Lucy Gray would be at a real disadvantage unless she was packing more snakes. When the drones had delivered her supplies, Lucy Gray sorted them and stowed them in her pockets. They hadn't seemed spacious enough to hold all the food and drink, along with another snake, but she was awfully clever. He had never seen her remove the snake that killed Treach. Festus brought Coriolanus and Clementia sandwiches at lunch. But they were both too nervous to eat. The rest of the students ate in their seats, not wanting to miss a moment. Coriolanus could hear whispered, yet passionate debates over who would win in the day. He could never remember people caring in the past. The beating sun began to blow. Oh, yay. I forgot that my sister had her autoimmune. Anyway, the beating sun began to dry out the arena, soaking up the shallow puddles and leaving only a few deep enough to drink from. Lucy Gray rested on a bit of rubble, her skirt spread out to catch the rays. The lull brought out Lucky, who gave a detailed weather forecast, including a heat advisory and tips to avoid related cramps, exhaustion, and stroke. The line at the lemonade stand outside the arena stretched long, and the people hid under umbrellas or crammed into precious bits of shade. Even the dependable coolness of Heavensby Hall failed, so students stripped off their jackets and fanned themselves with notebooks. By mid-afternoon, the school had made fruit punch available, which gave a festive feel to the event. Lucy Gray kept Reaper in her sights, but he'd made no move to engage her. Suddenly she rose, as if impatient to get on with things, and retraced her steps to Treach's body. Taking hold of one ankle, she began to drag him over to Reaper's morgue. Reaper appeared to wake up the moment she touched the body. He leaned out and shouted something unintelligible, then hurried down from the stands. Lucy Gray let go of Treach and ran to a nearby tunnel. Reaper assumed the job of transporting Treach, placing him neatly in the row of dead tributes and covering him with a flag remnant. Satisfied, he made his way back to the stands, but he'd only just reached the wall when Lucy Gray ran out from a second tunnel, pulled one of the flag pieces off the bodies, and gave a holler. Reaper whipped around and ran at her. Lucy Gray wasted no time in vanishing behind the barricade. Reaper replaced the flag, tucking the fabric under the bodies to hold it more securely in place, and went to rest against the pole. After a few minutes, he seemed to drift off, his eyes closed against the sun. Lucy Gray darted out again, yanked one of the flag segments free, and this time ran off with it trailing behind her. By the time Reaper had come to realize her disruption, she'd put 50 yards between them. His indecision allowed her to widen her lead, and she dragged the flag to the dead center of the arena, where she left it in the dirt and made for the stands. Angry now, Reaper ran over and repossessed his flag. He took a few steps after her, but the exertion had taken a toll on him. Pressing his hands against his temples, he panted rapidly, although he didn't appear to be sweating. Oz Lucky's recent update had reminded them. That could be a sign of heat stroke. She's trying to run him to death, thought Coriolanus, and it might just work. Reaper staggered a bit, as though drunk. Flag in tow, he made his way to his puddle, one of the few things that hadn't dried up during the afternoon. He dropped down to his knees and drank, slurping only until a muddy sludge remained at the bottom. As he sat back on his heels, a funny look crossed his face, and his fingers began to knead his ribs and cage. He vomited up a portion in the water, then retched for a while on his hands and knees before rising unsteadily. Still gripping the flag in one hand, he began to walk in slow, uneven steps back toward the morgue. Reaper had just made it when he collapsed on the ground, dragging himself in line next to Treach. One hand made an attempt to pull the flag over the group, but he managed only to cover himself part way before he drew in his limbs and went still. Coriolanus sat frozen in anticipation. Was that it? Had he really won? The Hunger Games? The Plinth Prize? The girl? He studied Lucy Gray's face as he watched Reaper from the stands, but she had a distant look, as if she were far away from the action in the arena. The audience in the hall began to murmur. Was Reaper dead? Shouldn't they be declaring a winner? Coriolanus and Clementia waved Lepidus and his mic away as they awaited the outcome. Half an hour passed before Lucy Gray climbed down from the stands and approached Reaper. She placed her fingers on his neck, checking his pulse. Satisfied, she closed his eyelids and tenderly arranged the flag over the tributes, as if she were putting children to bed. Then she went over and sat against a pole to wait. This seemed to convince the game makers, because Lucky appeared, jumping up and down, announcing that Lucy Gray Bard, tribute of District 12, and her mentor, Coriolanus Snow, had won the 10th Hunger Games. Heavensby Hall erupted around Coriolanus, and Festus organized a few classmates to lift his chair and parade him about the dais. When they finally set him down, Lepidus hounded him with questions, to which he could only reply that the experience had been both exhilarating and humbling. Then the entire student body was directed to the dining hall, where cake and posca had been provided for celebration. Coriolanus sat in a place of honor, receiving congratulations and downing more posca than was good for him. So what? Right now he felt invincible. Soteria rescued him just as his head felt fuzzy, ushering him from the dining hall and directing him to the high biology lab. I think they're bringing your girl over. Don't be surprised if they put you on camera together. Well done. Coriolanus gave her a spontaneous hug and hurried for the lab, grateful for the moment of quiet. He felt his lips stretching into an insane grin. He had won. He'd won glory, and a future, and maybe love, too. Any minute now, he'd have Lucy Gray in his arms. Oh, Snow lands on top. It most certainly does. He forced his cheeks to relax as he got to the door and straightened his jacket to help conceal the tipsy mess he actually was. It wouldn't do, somehow, to let Dr. Gall see him like that. Something bad is about to happen. This is the end of part 2. Part 3 is about to start, and I just know something bad's about to happen. When he opened the door of the high biology lab, he had found only Dean Highbottom sitting in his usual place at the table. Close the door behind you. Coriolanus obliged. Perhaps the dean wanted to congratulate him in private, or even apologize for abusing him. A falling star might one day have need of a rising one, but as he approached the dean, a cold dread washed over him. There, arranged on the table like lab specimens, were 3 items. An academy napkin stained with grape punch, his mother's silver compact, and a dingy white handkerchief. The meeting could not have lasted more than 5 minutes. Afterward, as agreed, Coriolanus headed directly to the recruitment center, where he became Panem's newest, if not shiniest, peacekeeper. No. And part 3 is titled The Peacekeeper. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. Okay, so I guess they put everything together. And the only outcome is that Snow becomes a peacekeeper. I think they're going to send him to District 12. I'm not even going to lie. Is Lucy Gray still alive? I really hope she's still alive. She's like the only person I want to live through this book. like, genuinely, everyone's kind of a bitch except for her. Shit. I hope, like, the consequences don't come back to Lucy Gray, even though I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't, because the Capitol is brutal. So, I don't know. My thoughts on what's about to happen is Coriolanus is going to go to District 12 as a peacekeeper. We have a whole nother part left. So I think that him and Lucy Gray is going to be sent back too. Him and Lucy Gray are possibly going to have this, like, romantic District 12 thing, and then he's going to be pulled back to the Capitol somehow with this Plinth Prize. Oh, wait, does he get the Plinth Prize? Oh my gosh, I don't know. But I think he's going to be pulled back to the Capitol somehow and break up their, like, romantic thing. But I honestly do hope they have, like, a little romantic venture. But I hope it ends with, like, Lucy Gray realizing that, like, Snow is actually, like, a manipulative, terrible person. And she, like, feels better about herself, you know? Like, I hope that's what happens. So, anyways, with that, this has been a long stream, but we got through all of part 2, and that's been really exciting. So, yeah. If you enjoyed, join me for part 3. I'm excited to see what happens. So, until then,